Welcome to the SENCast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the host of the SENCast and I'm one of the directors here at B Squared. The SENCast is here as a way to help improve knowledge around SEND. Yes, there is lots of stuff you can go and read, but we're all very busy and we do not have the time. For me, I can read social media, I can read articles, but sitting down and committing to a book is a big commitment. The SENCast is also a great way to get the same consistent message to schools, external professionals and parents. And in this week's episode, we're discussing promoting positive mental health for SENCos. My guest this week is Angela Scott, and Angela is the Regional Lead for SEND in the Eastern Partnership UK and is the Programme Lead for the SENCO, the Advanced SENCO and SENCOs as Leaders Awards. She is also a member of a number of national working groups for SEND. The SENCast is created and produced by us here at B Square, and as well as this podcast, we also have our SENCast sessions, our online CPD. And if you haven't accessed or know what a SENCast session is, these are video CPD sessions, so a presentation delivered as a video, often with the same great guests as on the podcast. We run 9 live sessions and 2 free SEND briefings every year. The sessions are £10 per school, and you can watch live on the day or watch later on because that video is yours forever. We have over 100 sessions you can purchase and use for CPD across the whole school, and you can now subscribe for £175 a year and access all of our sessions. It's really good value. Right, but before you do that, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing promoting positive mental health for SENCos. Discussing this topic with me today is Angela Scott. Angela is the National Lead for SEND for the Eastern Partnership UK and is Programme Lead for the SENCO, Advanced SENCO and SENCO as Leaders Awards. She is also a member of a number of national working groups around SEND, and as well as all of this and her training, she is also the author of Apt2Go, an audit and planning tool to help schools around self-improvement. Welcome back, Angela.
Thank you, Dale. It's good to be here.
You are welcome. Positive mental health for SENCos seems like an oxymoron in the current climate.
Thank you for that.
I don't know.
Have you got more here?
I don't know. I never know. I'm never good at my words, so I don't know if it's the right word. But promoting positive mental health for the least listened to, least supported person in a school. And we're talking about promoting mental health for the person who has the most difficult conversations with parents and the person who's often let down by the LA due to lack of funding. We're talking about their mental health, aren't we?
I thought we might, yeah.
It seems like it's needed.
I think it's needed. Whether we can come out the other end with a high degree of positivity time will tell. Right, where should we start? Well, I think you've started us there. So you've scoped the job description of a SENCO. If we were to stop at this point and just say, right, folks, I'm gonna say nothing for 5-10 minutes. In the first 5 minutes, I'd like you to write down what your job description as a SENCO says, if in fact you have a job description. And then for the second 5 minutes, I'd like you to write down the job description as it actually is.
Can we just balance that to 3 minutes for the first part and 7 minutes and extra pages for all the extra stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So let me have a little play with that as an idea. SENCOs, first thought up and first appeared in the Code of Practice in 1994. So big long history now. You could argue that it was a role that was set up in good faith, but perhaps without sufficient thought. It's there to coordinate. The meaning of the word coordinate is what? It is bring people and things together to make stuff work harmoniously.
I think it sounded better than SENFA, which will be a SEND facilitator.
It probably does sound a lot better than a SENFA. and as we know, we've got a SENDU in many places rather than a SENCO.
Yes.
Which is a much loved alternative term. The concept, I suppose you could say, was fraught at the beginning, because if you give somebody a role for SEN, is that in an instant going to mean that everybody else faces towards you and delegates everything to do with SEN to you, that lone person? And that, I think, is what's happened, rather than it being a coordination role, which is to take all of those great SEN things that are happening in our schools, coordinate them and help them to work harmoniously. The way you described it, Dale, is perhaps the greater reality of life. Yeah.
If when they made this SENCO, they actually went, you know what, kind of, I'm going to be using my hands to bring to Angela, you're at this level, we're going to put the SENCO up here, and we're going to elevate them.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make it an aspirational role.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pay extra money,
Mm-hmm.
and they will lead. And they'll
Mm-hmm.
be looked upon, type of person.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're just going to pick one of you lot. And then basically what happened is that person stayed there, and everyone else's attitude towards SEN may have just dropped, because and I think that's what happened. Rather than elevating that one person, you've kind of reduced the responsibility of everyone else.
Yeah, and that plays into the organisational structure of schools, and that cyclical question: why isn't the SENCO role a must? That it should be on senior leadership team. Why is it not legally required that it's on senior leadership team? And that's because government-wise autonomy is given to schools to organise the structure as they see fit. So there would never be a day, certainly currently politically, where that would be a mandate. The senior leadership position would be a mandate. And we know, don't we, that where you are on senior leadership team, there is the potential for making a bigger difference. However, we have what we have. The schools out there that have fully embraced the potential of the SENCO role, teasing out the potential of leadership of SEND, management of very precious and diminishing resources, and the coordination of other people's beavering away with SEN to make it harmonious, I would suggest is not the mindset of most schools. Where that happens, then we do see more wriggle room for SENCOs to do a job that is satisfying and that creates change. And those are the sorts of things, when we come to exploring mental health shortly, make a big difference. Why do we do what we do? Because we believe in something, because we have an element of control in terms of the changes that we can bring, and we get positive feedback, positive things begin to come back to us. That may not be the experience of many SENCOs currently. And of course, it's cross-referenced with the fact that the majority of SENCOs do this as part of other roles within the school.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do.
And where SENCOs carry perhaps heavy roles, such as a safeguarding lead, then the possibility of doing either of those two things really well and to the satisfaction of self and the environment within the available time diminishes considerably.
Yes. And especially if that person is also teaching 3 or 4 days a week, it's just not going to happen.
So, we get SENCOs to draw a little pie chart talking about, your pie is only that big. It's a cherry pie. It's going to be a medium-sized cherry pie. It's never going to be any bigger. And probably when you look at which bits of your school life, your professional life are taking chunks out of that pie, what is left often for the world of SEN will be the paperwork.
Yes.
It'll be the administration. It'll be the heavy weight of stuff around education healthcare plans, both applying for, seeing them through, managing the sort of fraught nature of that, along with families, holding a line there in terms of your engagement with them, and then servicing the EHCPs once it's come through. So draw that pie, see what you've got. Worth a conversation with leaders, actually, once you've drawn that pie chart, just to see what your week looks like.
My recommendation is have a digital calendar system. and go into your Outlook calendar or Google Calendar, whatever you use, and block out an annual review. Block out that time, because it's going to move. It might not be the correct day, but if you block out throughout your calendar however long you feel is required for each annual review. So that might be you need to come out of a class half an hour, 45 minutes beforehand to prepare and be in the right frame of mind to be clear and focused on that meeting, to have that meeting and to write a few notes up afterwards. You might want to block out 3 hours, I don't know, for each of those meetings. So you've got to block all of that time out because that has to happen legally. So do that. And then for each of those, there's some prep work. So you can start blocking that in.
Mhm.
And then you can just, by having that, you can just say to the senior leaders, right, so this is when I'm doing my annual review. So you will need to arrange cover for all of these times. And you start doing that. And there is all that legal EHCP and stuff. And every time you get a thing, you put one in, you kind of then going, okay, so we've just put in for E. I will have expecting back 5 hours worth of work at this point to do with this. And you can put that in.
Mm.
But keep doing that and do it in this digital online calendar so it's very visual.
Mm-hmm.
So they can access it whenever they want. They don't have to ask for it. They can look at your calendar. And every time you do send stuff, put it in.
Mm.
And help them see. Because that's the thing, I think, with SENCOs aren't braggers. It's what goes against nearly every single SENCO is you're not a bragger. You're not sitting in a staff room going, look at all the stuff I've done this week. In reality, what you're actually thinking is, actually look at all the stuff I haven't done this week. You're not looking at the glasses half full or three quarters, or you're looking at all the bits you missed.
Mm.
And that's how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not telling everyone how, you're kind of hiding what you're not doing. And there's a whole thing around that call it imposter syndrome, whatever. You're not feeling like you're making that being effective, which generally means you're kind of hiding how much work you're doing. And that goes against you.
Mm.
You need your senior leaders to see how hard you're working, how fast you're running, how far you're running. Even if it looks like in terms of effectiveness, we might not being that effective.
And I think that kind of time and motion study in action, once you start doing that, and once you are able to go back to the special education needs and disability regulations, which talk in very clear terms about the role of the SENCO, what it is there to achieve, and match that up with the Code of Practice 689, paragraph 689, which says similar, and the combination of those two things will give you a real clarity around the intention for the role of the SENCO. So disassociate yourself from it, not your role or not my role, Angela, but the role of the SENCO in this school. And if you map out the role of the SENCO in this school, drawing from those two documents, and then look at, as you say, Dale, a kind of time and motion study in terms of what you're currently doing. So that's the reality on the ground.
Yep.
And then you have a conversation in place, ready to begin to move things forward, either at speed or over time, so that incrementally you begin to see more of the expectations of the role as it is described in the regs and the code beginning to take shape, and the potential of the role will actually add to school improvement. That's the case that can be made.
Yes.
This isn't about you wanting a better life and a happier place, although that's where we're going.
That will come after.
That's where we're going. Okay, that's really important. But you have a role in school. The SENCO role has a pivotal place in school improvement, and that's the buy-in for leaders.
Yes. And the other thing which I forgot to mention, if you have an agreement that you do learning walks or anything like that, put that in your calendar. Because again, for everything you need to do as a SENCO, you're not in your classroom. That needs to be in your calendar. And that's not your PPA time. That's not that stuff. You need time for that. And, that you shouldn't have to be arranging cover for all of that.
Mm.
So that's kind of, here you go, everyone. Make sure I'm covered to me.
And again, hugely important to do it in quite an objective way so that you're describing the functionality of the SENCO role in school. So good combination of thoughts and ideas there. just wanted to add something of a cheerful nature for a moment. I met a happy SENCO a couple of weeks ago, and the SENCO was a happy SENCO because they had, not through a dissimilar process than the one we've just described, they had decided as a school that they would take some of the precious support staff time and create a role as an admin to the SENCO.
Yes.
And that has lifted a weight off that SENCO's shoulders. They are able to breathe strategically again, and they are able to fulfill many more, I won't say all, but many more of those core functions that they believe in that sit in those regs and the code of practice. So a practical thought, and definitely a SENCO with much more positive mental health, walking down the corridors and being available in the sort of ways that they needed to be.
I think Lorraine Peterson talks about the SENCO being the most expensive admin person in the school. And you are allowed a SENCO admin time. So use that time, get that done, point out that actually, although I'm doing this bit here, the arranging when the meeting will happen doesn't have to be me doing this. That could be someone else arranging that. And photocopying, preparing, things like that, again, that could be done by someone else.
Yeah.
But if your head has been a SENCO, they will know what you're doing. If your head hasn't been a SENCO, they will not know what you're doing. And that's kind of not their fault either. So making them aware, not in a, don't be apologetic about making them aware. It's a part of your role.
But it also plays into that notion of budget value, doesn't it? The role, be it 2 hours a week, dare I say, all the way through to full time, it costs. And in terms of value, it needs to be very clear to leadership that it is the greatest value it can possibly be. So, of course, we don't like to talk about people and money, but it's a resource. You are a resource. The role is a resource. And it's incumbent upon leaders to make the very best use of that role in doing what? In building that community of belonging for young people by skilling up everybody in the school to be able to step up to the plate.
And you cannot skill people up if you don't have any time.
Or if you're so pupil focused that you've had, 20% of the young people in your school delegated to you because they happen to have requirements for SEN provision.
Yes.
Well, good start. So I've been making some notes just as we've been going through, and whilst Dale was talking about that really important, it's not really quite a time emotion study, but it's kind of along those lines, culling paperwork.
Yes.
Again, Jean Gross, Beating Bureaucracy, such a tricky title to articulate on a whatever afternoon it is. But her book, Beating Bureaucracy, it was updated in 2015, just after the launch of our current code of practice. And she very much talks about how we default so quickly in the world of SEN into that paperwork stuff. Every time something new is introduced, we need to take something away so that we're not adding to our paperwork load. And whilst there are lots of things that leaders of SEND can't necessarily do alone, culling paperwork, streamlining systems, not duplicating and adding burdensome systems, looking for alternative ways that don't necessarily need heavy amounts of admin time, are gifted to you, particularly when we're talking about young people who require SEN support, slightly distinct from the smaller but growing population of those who require or have education healthcare plans. So paperwork cull is a good thing. And do have a little glance at Jean Gross's book, Beating Bureaucracy, just to give you a little bit of a kind of underpinning confidence that it's okay to consider how you're going to manage to reduce some of that paperwork trail around you. Okay, mental health. We haven't really talked about mental health and how we understand it. And I guess we've got an evolving language around mental health. We'd very much like to think that we're okay with the language now. Those two words feel much more comfortable than they used to, perhaps. Although, just going to test that out a little bit. So, if I said to you, I got to rush off after this podcast, you'll never know because you won't be able to see me rushing, but I've got to rush off after this podcast because I've got a doctor's appointment. I've hurt my knee. So in your heads, you might be thinking, I know, Angela, I've heard this story before. Or you might be thinking, I wonder how she's hurt her knee. And you might ask me about it. That's great. I'll tell you. I fell over, or I was playing netball, or I was rock climbing or whatever, and I bumped my knee. Similar story, similar place. I've got to rush off after this podcast. I've got a quick appointment with the doctor. So I've got a problem with my mental health. So we're used to the words mental health, aren't we? But I'm guessing that your response to me, if you were sitting opposite me, might be the same, might be different. It might be, I don't know. I'll leave that one with you for a moment.
Interestingly, so you said, I've got to go see a doctor about my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So that, just saying that I've got a problem with my knee, or I hurt my knee, we don't use the term I've hurt my mental health.
No, we might say I've got a problem with it.
That's saying if we have that problem, because it's literally I'm going to about mental health, implied mental health means negative.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing. When you say things like that, it's like mental health means negative.
Yeah.
If someone says the word mental health, it's like, oh, here we go. Either somebody's got a problem or someone's not happy.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about mental health when you're really happy, you say, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So there is a sort of negative when we see mental health. We've still got that mental health means problem.
Yes, absolutely. And that's encapsulated in some of the words from the good old World Health Organization that talks about our understanding, even today, 2024, that we see it as a sort of a negative thing. The concept is it's got that sort of negative slant to it, and we understand it as being in a different sort of vein, a different place, perhaps to that physical health side of things. So the World Health Organization, if we choose to go there, are very much on the same page with us, and they go on to talk about a definition of mental health, which is a much healthier one, and that is that we all have mental health all the time, just like we all have physical health all the time. It's that dynamic internal equilibrium that is an integral part of us, and it can be in a good place or in a less good place many times during a day, very often. And that's not to make light of mental health, but again, conversation that Dale and I had earlier on, you can get up in the morning and be quite a positive place. You land up just remembering a difficult phone call you've got to have with a parent, and that pops you down a little bit. And then you remember that you've got 3 annual reviews this afternoon, so that's just going to pop you down a little bit more.
Even for you this morning, the traffic.
And I had traffic this morning. So my dynamic internal equilibrium, which was very positive at 7:00 when I left, was not so positive when I had to tell Dale via a call that I was running late.
But I've learned that you can't help these things, so I'm quite cool with it, and life is good. But that's not always the case, is it? When you're running late.
Yeah.
We can adjust things today, life is good, but sometimes when you're late, that has a big impact. Absolutely.
So we have this golden thread, in a sense, that runs through us, leaders of SEND, SENCOs. We have a mental health profile. Sometimes it will be in a good place. Sometimes it will be in a less good place. Sometimes due to the role, it will be in a very poor place. And sometimes due to factors other than the role, it will be in a good or a poor place. So there are multiple things of life that will impact on that. At the very beginning of this session, Dale, you talked about the whole notion of positive mental health being a bit of an oxymoron. So what is this poison chalice that we have on the table here? Is it the golden goose? Is it the poison chalice? SENCOs, what leaders of SEND?
I think when I think of the thing is, if I come down to what makes mental health positive, yeah. So if I was neutral, what would make it positive? And generally, it's something that I am involved in, passionate about, linked to improving. So whatever that is, my children, my financial state, my effectiveness at work, and that isn't how much work effort I put in, it's how others perceive me, the actual outcome. Is my fitness improving?
Mm-hmm.
Is my dating life getting better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If any of if they are improving, I will have positive mental health.
Okay.
But as soon as one of them isn't, that's to me when we have negative mental health, because it's negative. It's aren't going how we want them to. That's to me a very simplistic way of talking about mental health, but that's kind of what works for me.
And that's really pivotal and extremely helpful, because as you were describing that in a very sort of life affirming way, in a sense, this is where life is. A couple of words came to mind around, firstly, having control. So in order for life to be improving, in order for you to be able to take things, or any of us to take things forwards, we have to feel that we have some sense of control to input into that process. Yeah. So having control is an important
And
aspect.
sometimes we don't have much control, but we are impacting, which is still part of that control. You're influencing.
Yes.
So sometimes the impact means a small amount of control. You can influence the outcome. Not I am in control.
No.
But I'm doing the right things. I am getting my hair cut when I'm going out on dates. That should hopefully have a better opinion. I've put my really expensive aftershave on. That is giving me some level of impact control on hopefully this will go well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the control, the ability to influence something, and the minute pieces of control that then add together to make something better.
Yes.
Okay. And that word control in all its sort of shades is incredibly important. The other thing that, again, as you were talking, I noted down, is an acronym, SOC, sense of coherence. So to have a sense of coherence, and we'll go back to the dating moment if we may, presumably in that moment, you kind of know when you're going to meet, you kind of worked out what you're going to wear that matches with the haircut that's just been had. Potentially you've got a rough idea of which restaurant or which cinema or movie you're going to see, etc. You've got a sense of coherence around that event. So you can see it, you can visualize it, you can sort of put yourself in that moment. You know there might be some surprises somewhere along the lines. You don't know how the conversation's going to go, but you've got some sense of coherence about it. And that can give a relatively calming feel around stuff.
Yes.
So just setting the SENCO role aside to one moment and looking at an event that all of us experienced over the last little while, and that's the COVID event. There's quite a lot of there's mountains of research that have come out of COVID. You could be reading research as a sort of late night event forever and a day, but of all the various bits of research that came out of the COVID and the lockdown events, was this opinion gathered and kind of supported that we all, as a nation, lost our sense of coherence. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to have a Christmas break. We didn't know if we were going to be able to celebrate somebody's birthday. We didn't know what the rules were. Nobody knew what the rules were. We didn't know what the rules were as they began to be sort of changed. We didn't know when we were going to come out of lockdown. Every bit of coherent aspect of our previous lives went.
Yes.
And we lost a sense of coherence. School wasn't happening in the same way. Kids weren't able to meet up in the same sort of way. It kind of all went. And there is a strong message that researchers have taken from that lack of a sense of coherence exacerbates poor mental health. If we look at the SENCO role, the reason why SENCOs go into the role, the passion, and you use that word, that they bring to wanting to do that role, first and foremost, implicit within that is the belief that there will be some control over how they do the role.
Yes.
Secondly, there needs to be some sense of coherence, that the role has got some structure and something that you can get hold of so that you can then improve it.
Yes.
The question is, do many SENCOs feel that the way SEN is done outside at the moment, is it coherent, or are there just too many loose ends within the local authority systems, within the ability to get hold of specialists? Are there too many loose bits of stuff around trying to herd a mass of teachers in secondary schools into a good place in respect of responses within their teaching to young people with SEN? That sense of coherence that SEN needs is potentially at quite a low ebb.
I think it's a really low ebb, and I do come across lots of SENCOs in groups where they're being worked around.
Mm-hmm.
So conversation had without them being involved, they're not included. I was at a local authority conference and pupils were being internally and externally excluded who were on the SEN register. The SENCO had no idea. The SENCO was not even involved in the interview afterwards to get them back into, was not aware of any of it.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't even tell you if the reason they were internally or excluded was to do with their SEN. It was, so I see things like this where people are SENCOs almost purposefully or forgetfully not involved in things. I come across SENCOs where whatever they say, their head teacher is kind of going the other opposite direction. So they're really working on their own. And I think that is what I see a lot. And I think also, and I've said this a lot, that when parents have issues around SEN, the only real person they can get hold of is that SENCO.
Mm.
That SENCO is the route to everyone behind them. So they get a lot of brunt from that. And they don't pass that horrible conversation on. It's just, I've just had a parent on the phone. I need to do this now. Can you contact? Yeah, it's not passed on. And I do think that there is, the same ways, if you are a counsellor,
Mm-hmm.
you are mentored.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be something for SENCOs.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've already gone off on a tangent from where you asked me,
but it's all it's the reality on the ground. It's not what's on the job description.
Yes.
It's what's on the real job description, and the combination of some of those things, many of those things, or all of those things will give rise potentially to a sense of lack of control.
Yep.
Which is a big tick for poor mental health. And it will give a rise to that feeling that there is no sense of coherence in this at all, in the system, or in what as a SENCO can be brought to the school. So again, you've got a second tick in that risk. It's a risk. There are two big risk factors there that are seen to be risk factors for poor mental health. And it's important for us to understand that by nature of the role, it does have slightly greater risk factors than perhaps other roles in the school. And therefore, SENCOs can, in a sense, depersonalise some of the feelings they might be having around perhaps feeling overwhelmed, not being able to do the job, because it's not personal. The way the job is wired, the way where the job sits within the hierarchy of the school is essentially wired to build a lack of control, a lack of sense of coherence, and therefore put the role at greater risk of poor mental health.
Yes. And if you think about, another thing is a couple of groups is people are leaving the profession because they're not effective. And it's what do people mean by not effective? And it goes back to like me talk about that, what is mental health is I want to move things forward. And that's what they want to see, I think. And when they're working really hard, they're doing everything under the sun. And in their opinion, they're going backwards, then that has to lead to poor mental health.
Yeah.
But it's kind of how you measure that. And it's ones I often look at is when I'm looking at my mental health or looking at things off. So when you're in that situation where you think I'm not being effective, what would happen if you weren't there? That's the sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't there and everything would go wrong, then that is the effect you're having. It might not be as good as you want. It might not be as good as what you feel the children deserve or things like that, or what they should have and things like that. But if you weren't there doing that, what is the impact?
Mm-hmm. So I've done a couple of columns.
I didn't realize I'm going to get analysed so much.
I know. It's great, this, isn't it? It's all in pictures. It means nothing to anybody. So my doodlings. So we've got risk factors. I think we've established risk factors. There are, therefore, conversations that we're now beginning to have around protective factors. And the promotion of positive mental health may not be to remove the risk factors, because probably we can't. But what we can do is to begin to identify some of the protective factors that give us a much better chance of managing that dynamic internal equilibrium, so that, yes, it's going to go up and down, it's going to bob, negatively and positively, but that we increasingly have a perception of there being more positive moments or more strongly positive moments than an overwhelming sense of the role being negative. And that's the reality. We're not going to be able to shoot for 100% positivity
Nope.
around, any role, but particularly this one. But identifying those risk factors, capturing them, articulating them, and then looking at the protective factors. And those protective factors will encompass some general things. But then, just as we talk about the uniqueness of young people who require SEN provision, we also need to talk about the uniqueness of SENCOs, because what may be a protective factor for one person may not be a protective factor for another.
No. And what I would say is how you judge your success. You can do it in lots of different ways. And I love quoting stupid Facebook pictures. And one of them you see a lot in the SENCOs, which is 100% true. And although it is a stupid message you see on Facebook, which is easily discarded, it's one of the ones where I really believe in. There's 3 or 4 I really believe in, but it is, you cannot change the world, but you can change the world for one person. So when you are not feeling great, you can maybe get one email from a parent or just ask, how is a child doing? And you can get some really lovely responses that what you've put in has happened, and you get really good feedback. It might not be from a member of staff in your school, it might not be from the local authority, but in reality, in the scheme of things, it's the children who matter and the parents. So that's the bit you've got to kind of, who am I doing this for? Who is the one who can really validate what I am doing?
Absolutely. So the SENCO is unique in its role because it has a close relationship, a close professional relationship with many more people than the average teacher. So we've got some, not many, external specialists. I'll say that quickly because they're a diminishing breed. But we also have a much different relationship with parents and with young people who often we have the privilege of getting to know a little bit better. Where we also need to put some of our energies is to the amazing outcomes of encouraging a member or some members of our teaching colleagues, of our staff, to begin to feel more confident and to have more wins than losses in terms of getting to know young people with an SEN profile, feeling more confident about teaching them and building their own expertise. And if we're talking about protective factors, then beginning to identify, and this often comes from a sort of mental audit of our teaching colleagues, beginning to identify those teachers who kind of get this, but may not be very confident in sharing what they're doing with others. That's the critical mass. Those are the people to whom attention needs to be paid, conversations need to be had, practice needs to be showcased, and implicitly, as a strategy, we're beginning to take control of moving practice on through others, so that that delegated leadership begins to be a thing. Now, we can take that forward in a couple of different ways. Yes, we can identify teachers whose hearts and minds are in the same place, and they are the first and perhaps easiest and most productive to begin to nurture and grow. We also perhaps want to look at those teachers who have particular influence of others. So identifying people with a wide sphere of influence across the school, particularly if you work in a big school, plays into the strategy of developing a more distributed leadership approach towards SEN. Because the fact is that, love them as much as we do, one person will never meet the requirements of every single young person with an SEN profile in the school. And once we've got hold of that is an impossible ask, then we've got to look at the kind of the people out there who can be part of that building that we want to create. I'm just drawing on a Harvard study about different types of leadership. It was one of the few articles that really resonated, because it didn't talk in gobbledygook about leadership, but it talked about, are you a leader who's a doctor because you'll fix everything? That's possibly what a SENCO tries to be.
Yes.
Are you a leader because you're an army sergeant or whatever, and you just shout at everybody and they do it? And so it goes on. But there's one particular type of leader that really resonates with the SENCO role, and that is the leadership skills of the architect, that looks at a blank piece of paper, that sees nothing, but then draws the building they want to create. And as the architect, they begin to put the component parts in place so that ultimately they get close to and finally at a point where that building is viable. Now, the architect, the leader with the architect skills, is potentially the one that resonates best with the role of the SENCO, because you have a vision, you look at a strategy that's solid in its foundations, so you're drawing on those members of staff who are going to come with you, and you're gradually developing something that is recognisably intact and viable. Choosing to walk that path and taking very small steps towards it does two things. It builds an inner sense of control. I can see something I want to develop here. Tick for positive mental health.
Yeah.
And it begins to build a sense of coherence, because you can kind of see where you're going.
Yeah.
Tick for mental health.
In my head, I'm trying to work out what's the difference between a doctor and the architect.
Okay.
And in the doctor, you know where the leg's supposed to be on the body. And if it's not there, you'll get it back to where it should be. You know how it's supposed to look. So you've almost got like a pre-formatted plan of this is how it should be. I don't maybe think when you've got SEN involved, it will always fit that mold. So like a doctor may be fixing it in a certain way that is prescribed.
And I think a doctor fixing just a part of a person. And that's what SENCOs often do. They fix a part, and then that person goes away, but they haven't fundamentally changed.
No, that's the sort of thing. The architect is building something new. A doctor is getting back to where we should be, but the architect is building on that and building something better.
Yeah, absolutely. So The positive mental health of having an element of control, practicing that element of control in small ways, and we'll come to a couple of small ways in a moment, and building a kind of coherent picture of where SEN in this school could go, what it could look like, and being kind to yourself about how long it's going to take you to get to that place, because it does become a little bit like snakes and ladders. You go up a ladder, 2 rungs, and you come right back down again. That's how, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what will happen. But your overarching plan is viable, it's shareable, and if you buy into this notion of distributive leadership, if you start using the language of we, not I.
Yes.
Okay, SENCOs must avoid the word I and use the word we. We will seek a further assessment. We will talk to the parents. We will find out from the young person. Okay, not I. It's got to be distributed. Then you are moving towards shaping a viable community that ultimately everybody needs to see and own. So you give everybody else a sense of coherence as well.
Yes. So when we think of control, there's a 3, Ali Knowles on the podcast talked about the no control, some control, full control. And it's really amazing how just moving from no control to some control can really help your mental health. And it's things like, everyone laughs at me in the office, and Kim Griffin's laughed at me as well, is around my lunches at work. So today we went to the cafe as a guest, but in the room behind me, there are a number of not pot noodles, but slightly healthier, but probably not that much healthier, but nicer tasting. Other noodle brands are available. But by me having that, I know without doubt, I have my lunch here. I'm fully in control of my lunch, and I can just forget about it. Whereas if I had to go over every day to the cafe and get a sandwich, well, I only like 3 of their sandwiches. What happens if they've run out? What happens if I don't like that soup? I've only gone down to some control. It depends what's left. And so just having those simple changes in how your level of control has an impact on your mental health. I can just forget about certain things. I've set my life up in certain ways to give me as much control as possible. I didn't realize this at the time. So Ali kind of explained it to me that this is, you do it. It does this. I was like, it does, doesn't it? I can kind of ignore things. And that's the thing. I've got that full control. It's not, to me, I would say it's not impacting me in mental health at all, but it's probably giving me a little positive boost because I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. But it's those sorts of things in my life that I've done just make me my life easier to manage.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, you're weird. And yes, I am weird if you're listening, but it works for me.
And I think because you're able to articulate it, you've thought it through, you can see in a concrete way how that contributes. You've got that kind of self-talk. You know you're a step further than many people for whom life kind of does to them. And it's very easy for that to happen, particularly in busy schools, in the role of SENCO, when you're also carrying 6 other roles and a heavy teacher commitment. And, you know, I've got a thingamajig here in terms of good old Rutter's locus of control, where I'm just looking at a picture of no control versus full control, and the no control area is 0 in terms of a score, and it's described as other people react in a negative way, and they're making decisions that affect my life, and I have no control. The next step up is there's no point working hard to change anything, as there's nothing I can do. So that would be, there's no point trying to set a strategy for SEN because I can't move it. And once we're in that place, then what important word did you use, Dale? Good mental health for you is improving things.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we're in that place that says, well, there's no point working hard to change anything because there's nothing I can do, we are immediately at risk.
Yes.
Where we need to get to, you know, the sort of reasonable place, I guess, is that kind of midpoint, which you described by doing little things and actually stopping and thinking, I I actually chose to do that.
Yes.
And it is making an effort to notice when we've taken control of something, when we've used a slightly different piece of language, when we've pushed back on something, when we've said to somebody, I'll meet you tomorrow afternoon because right now I know it's really desperate, but there are one or two other things that need to be done. Okay, so half an hour tomorrow afternoon, push back. The minute we have recognized that that was a moment of reasonable control, then we're on the pathway.
Yes.
And the pathway of control and establishing a sense of coherence is a big contributor to the way in which the role can then begin to grow and develop. Things can improve. And of course, it's always going to be a manic place to try and balance all of those plates. But recognizing those protective factors are really important. I guess as well, telling somebody, do we as leaders of SEND have the buddy that we need? Somebody who gets the role?
Yes.
The biggest benefit of people coming on to the dreaded National Award course or the most wonderful advanced SENCO or SENCOs as Leaders courses are that there are like-minded people there. And there's a tribe of SENCOs. That is a positive mental health place because people are understood and we all need to be understood. We need to not have to explain a role in order for somebody to talk to us. We can just talk because other people get it.
It's like when parents, EHCP diagnosis, oh my God,
Yeah.
you talk to your friends, their kids don't get you because, well, no, you probably just bad parenting. You have that. Then you finally find this group of people who are further down the path or similar point to you, and they get it. And you can also draw on their experiences by being further down the path. I was really worried about this, but it wasn't a big thing. That thing, I think any way you can connect with SENCOs face-to-face is best.
Mm-hmm.
But there are various communities like Sensible SENCO on Facebook and various others. And to me, it's got to be conversational.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sort of thing. It's got to be that connection that you can have that feedback and the thing and find out, actually, I am not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Most other SENCOs feel the same way I do.
Mm-hmm.
That's not great.
Absolutely. So finding your tribe or whatever you want to call it and maintaining that network is important. Sharing good news, no matter how tiny things, because that rehearses the fact that you have got an element of control. Something good has happened and you need to have a place to position that with others.
And I find that even just asking that question, so on the Sensible and SENCO, what are your wins this week?
Yeah.
And you might go, I haven't had any.
Mm-hmm.
Have I? And then the next week you get there and going, oh, actually, do you even recognise those? Are you kind of just so feeling you've got no control, you've got no effect, you're not actually recognising any good things that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in that place, then you probably have done something, but you're so buried that you don't recognise where you do have control. You don't recognise where you have established a little bit of a sense of coherence, etc. The research, odd thing to say, but listening as you're doing now, watching, reading, it reminds you all the time why you wanted to do this. It recalibrates the passion.
Yes.
And it gives you a wider network. It gives your brain other things to work on and good ideas, and reminds you that actually out there are things you can grab, small manageable things you can grab. And to take Dale's word, improving, you can do that. And that again is a protective factor. I was going to come to reciprocal. Yeah. Looking at the language that's being used and rehearsing those kind of positive words around the role of the SENCO, the positive words around young people with SEN. Look at how you model and keep yourself enthusiastic. So what is great about being autistic? What is great about being dyslexic? What is great about, do we know that we've got members of staff who themselves have those sorts of profiles, who can have conversations with other staff or with young people about what works well in school? Look at your other foot soldiers, as it were, so that you're beginning to develop a coherent team that bring different skills, different life views into the frame. And that way you can develop an internal kind of buddy system, and you can develop a hearts and minds group that are really firing on that kind of SEN front, so that you've got people to talk with and ideas to kind of develop.
Because often when you're talking like autism and things like that, you are often, the vision that is given is somebody in ear defenders, struggling with everything, can't do anything.
Mm.
And it kind of gives a very negative view of autism.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what your view is, then you have a child with autism, that's what your expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
But having positive role models, and also, at least on the staff, I think someone said there's like generally at least one or two teachers in every school who are neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And might even be the SENCO, because that's the person who's kind of, but that relatable one is, I get it. Whether they might be diagnosed or not, that's a different thing. But there's generally people in that staff room who are neurodivergent.
Yep.
And it's important for you to people recognise and just look around and go, one of us is. Okay, so if we are, what's the impact?
Yeah. And how did you do school?
Yeah.
Because adults were kids.
Yes.
And kids become adults. And that opportunity to sort of cross-fertilise information backwards and forwards, to have your adult ambassadors, if people feel brave enough to do that, to really take the mystery, the myth and the difficulty out of SEN and create a much more vibrant environment, that contributes to something called reciprocal determinism, which means that people feed off people. That changes environments. Change the environment, and then you've got a better chance of improving that environment, which contributes to better mental health.
Yes. We all know one person who brings us down.
Mm.
And there are people, I've been to schools where one person is propping that whole school up. And that could be a teacher, or it could be a deputy, or it could be the head. But you know that one person is holding that school together. And I've been to a school where it was a teaching deputy. It was my daughter's primary school, and they left, and a lot left with that person. And that school was not the same after they left. And it's really interesting. So you've got to think about, when you are in that situation, positive, go for it, use it. But when it's that negative, how can we reduce that negative? How can we? And it might be that they just need to maybe change their mindset. And as you said, you might need to help them see the positives. Yes, they can't do that. But have you seen them do this?
And that's fed by the positivity of language from the SENCO, the right sort of body language, the right sort of questions, and drawing from blogs and wider sources around the different ways in which these various things that we're working with can play out in adult lives. And that's also quite helpful potentially for parents as well, because for parents, those young people are going to grow up. They need to know that there's a whole world out there that is absolutely vibrant in terms of, blogs and autism, dyslexia, and the whole thing is very much alive and well now. And it's not just potted into what we're doing in the school classrooms, in the corridors. We've got a community that is beginning to get ahead of steam around improving the sort of language, the ambitions, the aspirations of young people. So being well read, being able to draw on some of those things gives credibility, it gives value to your voice. People will seek out your views for reasons other than problems if you're able to give them wider perspectives. And that begins to feed into your sense of control and sense of coherence. Meet once a year as a minimum with a group of SENCos. Look back at what has happened, what has been difficult, but what has improved over the last year, and together develop an action plan for the year ahead. Work where possible to make sure that action plan talks to the school development plan, because it shouldn't be an SEN action plan alone. it needs to talk to the school development plan, and the two should be one.
Yes, because that SEN improvement plan is, again, you're coordinating, you're not doing it.
You're coordinating it.
That
Yes.
plan will come from your leaders, it will come from the whole school. You're just kind of putting it there.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking of the SENCO role in sort of 3 letters, really. Leadership of SEND, which I've mentioned several times. You need to think like a leader, and you need to be able to, for your own protective factors, mental health wise, you need to seek a distributive leadership style. Managing resources as efficiently as possible, that's different from leadership, and coordinating the skills and talents, including, as we've just said, your staff who are neurodiverse. Those are skills and talents that can be coordinated and placed in nice strategic ways in order to inform and upskill and create an environment where your mindset about SEND is beginning to play out in other people's thinking. That's that reciprocal determinism. What you do plays into other people's behaviours, plays into the wider environment. And that gives you a real sense of control. And it begins to build, thinking of architects here, begins to build a great sense of coherence within that kind of perceived building that you're off with.
Yes, definitely. Anything else you want to go through?
Well, finding time for hobbies.
That's the bit I had 2 bits left, and that was one of them.
Goes without saying. Be a bit person-centered at this point. What are you interested in? What might you like to be interested in? What are you going to pursue for yourself? Where is your downtime? And it's not acceptable to say there is no downtime. Where is your downtime? Whether that's listening to music, walking, whatever. The word on the street about protective factors and mental health is a walk outside on a regular basis is not a bad idea for our mental health. And it is also quite a creative moment when we're on the move. Being on the move gives perspective. It makes us realize that there are bigger things out there, but that actually we can take some control of some elements of our work. And it gives a whole fresh perspective on things. So interests, that's where you were going to go, Dale, wasn't it?
Yeah, one of them was interesting. One of the things that walk, what I found I quite like, and I've reflected on it quite a bit, is there are things I do where I've got time to think. So I'm not really concentrating on anything. So walking is one, driving down the motorway is another, or maybe just on the traveling or moving, where I can't necessarily sit there and work is really good, because I might have this idea I want to do, but because I can't do it in the moment, what I find, that idea percolates and grows. And I might go through a few iterations and realize if I'd started at the beginning, that probably would have gone in the wrong direction. Now I've thought about it more, I'm going to go in a much better direction. So I find that percolating of that idea over an hour or so while in the car or going for a long walk. When I come back, I've kind of got a bit of an action plan in my head of what I want to do. So one of them is, yes, get some time for you. And part of that is a pure self-centered, person-centered, selfish kind of way. You need it. But on a flip side, if you were painting something 50 foot by 50 foot, really big, and you only ever stood 2 foot away, you wouldn't get it. So when you're having that walk and you're walking away for that hour, and then you turn around, hopefully you don't walk that far in an hour, you get to still see the picture. But if you then turn around, you see. And that's what I find is when I do something where I'm literally away from work, and I've kind of in my head metaphorically left work, when I'm walking back to it in my head, I'm in a different place. I'm looking at things in a different way. My priorities are different than when I walked away. So having that chance to walk away to then come back is really, really important. And the other bit, and this is partly because of the way I work, is I'm quite disorganized naturally. So I put a lot of work into being organized. So I generally spend probably about half an hour a week. And I know when I've not done it, because I get really bad. And if you're waiting for me to email you back, it's not been a great week. But I find by putting in half an hour at the end of the week or an hour, and you might say I get nothing done. Yeah, because in reality, in that half an hour, I'm looking at my week ahead. I'm going through those things. But what I'm also doing is I'm making sure I've got the prerequisites there. So if I'm doing something with Andrew, I'm podcasting with Andrew on Wednesday, have I written the bits I need to? Have I prepped? Have I done those things? Yes. Cool. Right. Wednesday's great. Thursday, have I done this? No. Oh, I haven't emailed them where we're meeting. Cool. I need to do that. It helps me mean I'm not running around next week. So I always do that week ahead. I kind of have a look back. Is there anything I should have done? And I look forward a week. What is it I need to do? But it just helps me then see my week ahead and think about it. Therefore, I already now know how much or how little free time I have. Yeah. So I do podcasting, I do webinars, I have lots of meetings with schools, I do trips, I do events. So I can look at my next week and I now know if someone asks me to do something, I already know if I can or can't.
Yeah.
I've got a rough idea of how much free time I have.
And that's the point, I think, about auditing through experience. So, if you have set up by the end of this week, I will. So that's your strategic. Yeah, by the end of this week, I will. And that one tiny strategic thing that you'll take control of. But you also have to have a little space, a little box, a little Post-it note container that says, however, these are the things that are going to get in the way. Based on experience, it is likely that 6 parents will call me. Yeah, I don't know which 6, but it will be 6.
Yes.
It is likely that I'll be asked to cover 2 lessons because for some odd reason people think that SENCO should cover lessons.
You've got nothing. You're not doing
Absolutely.
anything.
And it is likely as well that we'll have a safeguarding issue that I'll be involved in. So these are the things that are going to get in the way. And I at the moment, I've now got 7 or 8, maybe 9 Post-it notes. I haven't got any detail on them, but experience tells me these are the things that are going to get in the way. That helps you to understand that there will be stuff.
Yes.
that will stop you being strategic. Then tracking back to what you've said, there might be a bit of stuff ahead that you could deal with so that you do clear a little bit of space organisationally. And then I might look at whether my aspiration by the end of the week needs to be made just a little bit smaller so that potentially it's an element of that, not the whole thing.
And what you might need to do for, again, and my friend does this, he has a daily journal thing. And he writes down, what am I worrying about tomorrow? Mm-hmm. What have I done well? Type thing. What went well this week?
Yeah.
So if you're having that half hour review where you're looking ahead and you're looking back, what actually have you? Because it might be a small thing, but if you start writing them down, and you then get to look through this calendar, and see how many things.
And that's about the SENCO self-worth and the value that the role brings to the school. And we lose it because we drown in the role. So really protective behaviours around SENCO mental health have to incorporate something either while you're walking, so that's thinking on the move, or something that's literally physically noted down that says this and this, tiny, itsy bitsy, but this and this.
And I think having those things you've achieved, it might be for those 6 phone calls with parents, 3 you actually made really good progress on, made a difference. Yeah, write those down. Then when you kind of get towards the end of the year and you've got that really full calendar and you're looking at all of that, you're actually going, well, actually, we got through all those EHCPs, we did all those reviews, we've done all of this. It helps you. And I think you can record down, got asked to cover 2 lessons, didn't do this. And if you kind of write those sorts of things down, you then give that opportunity to your senior leaders and go, what would you prefer?
The other thing to write down, and this is sometimes harder to do, is when somebody says something nice. So when a parent says, you really helped me there, don't lose it. Yes, of course, you'll put it in your head, but that's not quite as good as writing it down and having a little place that says nice things people say.
Because you might have a really horrible week and you might think you're not being effective. But again, your effectiveness at SENCO isn't solely reliant on you. You are in the center of a web. You are coordinating with so many people around you, and they could all be letting you down, which means no matter how fast you run, you are going to go backwards.
And we can have the perfect day. up until 3:15 when somebody shouts at us. And as far as we're concerned, we've had a rubbish day.
Yes. It's taking the step back, taking the emotions out and thinking about these things. And you might think, I don't have time to take a step back. It will help you.
It's a protective behaviour. And I think rehearsing those and thinking about the kind of the pot of protective behaviours from which we can draw needs to be significant. We need to have a large number of protective behaviours because not all of those things are going to be available to us all of the time. There may not be a SENCO buddy we can talk to. There may not be an opportunity to go for a walk. So what are the protective behaviours that we've noted? What else can we draw from? And that's a really important list for us to actually actively make and continue to add to.
Yes. And I'm going to wrap it up. So mental health generally linked to improving. It's just underlying thing, I think, for everyone. No one's going to be happy if they're going backwards. But and a lot of with SENCOs, you will have those personal factors. Everyone will have those, and we will not have any control over those. Apart from maybe how we feel about our work won't overflow into our own personal lives, so we can deal with those things better. So we've got to focus on that, our working life, and we've got to make sure it's that coordinator, it's that web, it's that connectedness that is often the bit that's going wrong. It's not how hard you're working or how fast you're running or how many things you take on. You need other people. And if your head teacher has no idea how hard you're working because you're hiding it because you're feeling you're failing, that will then just turn into a worse circle. You've kind of got to put that this is what I'm doing, make it visible. This is the stuff I've got to get on with. And I'm not being affected. If you don't let people know what you're up against, no one's going to help you.
And again, talking about the potential of the SENCO role and its value in regard to school improvement.
Yes. And if you do have like SEN and that school improvement and you're not meeting it, that is not your fault. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of thing. If some people feel that if SEN hasn't improved, that's the SENCO's fault. Yeah.
You can't and mustn't run harder because that's a risk factor. Your protective factor is to step back and be strategic at that point and have those brave conversations.
And go, the reason we have not improved this is actually that is a responsibility of the maths lead. The reason we haven't done this is actually as a school, this was a priority this year. Everyone focused on that, which meant this didn't have time. You've got to say those things. It's not you.
It's how the role is being perceived and used.
And the other priorities in the school, which others believe are more important. So it's those things, and it's really important to think about that. Absolutely. So once again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Hopefully I think if people might be listening to this book going, I hope you get some lovely things, or these are the 3 things to improve my mental health. It's not about that. It's about recognizing where you are. So thank you. It's interesting as you're recording all the things I write. It's quite daunting. I feel like I'm being judged. You're gonna...
Nobody will be able to read it because they're scattered over a page with circles and arrows and triangles. It
feels like a police interview. He said
that.
One thing I say, I'll talk for 5 minutes, she writes nothing. Next thing I write, she's written up his boxes, it's filled in. I'm going, okay, is that a good thing?
It's the way my brain works, sadly, which is not a good thing when I see what ridiculous diagrams I've drawn. So much for control and sense of coherence. There's no sense of coherence on this piece of paper.
There is to you.
Yes, there is to me.
That's why I don't like paper, because there's always a limit of the size. You always have to choose where you start. It's the whole thing with my wife and shopping list, but that's a whole different thing.
Oh, I just fit something else in between the diagrams.
So thanks once again. Thank you. I think you've got some links from me, so I'm going to share those. And also, as always, your contact details. If you want to get hold of Angela, you can. And you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the website, wherever you listen to the podcast, and also on the SENCast website. Please follow us on the social medias, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are simply the SENCast, and you'll find us, follow us, and share us and things. And before we go, I'd just like to remind you to go and check out SENCast sessions. If you're listening to this podcast and you like the way we do things and you want a more formal way of kind of learning, Then SENCOs Sessions is our CPD library with over 100 different sessions. And if you haven't accessed SENCOs Sessions before, it's really, really easy. A number of the guests on the podcast are speakers on SENCOs Sessions, and we run 9 live sessions every year, which you can buy access to. We run 2 free sender briefings every year as well. And the paid for sessions are £10 each per school. And you can watch them live on the day, if it's one of those live sessions, or watch it later. All sessions are yours forever. So you're going to build up a really good CPD around SEND for your school. And it is a really good way to get that CPD around SEND for all staff. Just go to the SENCOs website, which is www.thesencos.com, and you'll see SENCOs Sessions at the top, and you'll be able to browse through all our different sessions. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the SENCast. It is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.